Most men spend the majority of their effort in the wrong direction. They focus on the visible, the external, the measurable things, what they look like, what they earn, what they drive, what their social position is. And they operate from the assumption that if those things are impressive enough, attraction will follow naturally. And then they watch a man with fewer of those things create deeper, more effortless connections with women, and cannot understand why. Here is the answer that most content on this topic never gives clearly. Attraction is not a response to your resume. It is a response to how a specific person makes a woman feel, in the body, in the nervous system, at a level that precedes conscious evaluation. And the mechanics of that feeling are rooted in very specific psychological and biological realities that have nothing to do with your net worth or the car in your driveway. There are 6 specific psychological realities in female psychology, 6 specific vulnerabilities in how women respond to certain male behaviors and qualities that most men are completely unaware of, not because the information is unavailable, but because no one has explained it in a way that is both honest and psychologically grounded. That is what this video is. 6 female psychological vulnerabilities. Each one is a real, documented, biologically and psychologically rooted mechanism. Each one explains a specific dimension of why women respond the way they do, not to looks, not to money, but to specific qualities of presence, communication, and behavior. And each one is something you can understand, develop, and begin applying immediately. By the time we reach the 6th one, you will have a complete and accurate picture of what female attraction actually responds to, and why so many men who seem to have everything are producing so little of it. Love. I'm Liza. This is Secrets Inside the Mind. If you're new here, subscribe to Secrets Inside the Mind right now. Every week, I break down the real psychology of attraction, female behavior, and what actually moves women beneath the surface. Subscribe, turn on the bell, and let's get into it. Before the 6 points, I need to address the word in the title directly, because the way you understand it determines whether what follows is useful or damaging. When I say female psychological vulnerabilities or weaknesses, I am not talking about flaws to exploit. I am not describing manipulation targets. I am describing the specific, universal, biologically and psychologically rooted ways that women are wired to respond to certain qualities in men. Every human being has these patterns of response that are not fully chosen, not fully conscious, and not easily overridden by rational evaluation. They are simply part of how we are built. Understanding these mechanisms is not manipulation, it is literacy. The man who understands them can become more genuinely compelling, not by performing something false, but by developing the real qualities that activate authentic response. The man who does not understand them spends years doing the wrong things with genuine effort and genuine frustration. There is one more thing I want to name clearly. These mechanisms are not weaknesses in the sense of inferiority. They are the product of millions of years of human evolutionary development. They exist in women for the same reason that men have their own equivalent patterns, because they served the survival and bonding requirements of the species. Understanding them is not condescending, it is honest. With that frame in place, let's begin. Vulnerability number 1. A woman's response to intentional, respectful physical contact is one of the most powerful and least understood mechanisms in attraction psychology. Here is the biology. The human body releases a hormone called oxytocin in response to certain forms of physical contact. Gentle, deliberate, context-appropriate touch. Oxytocin is not a minor variable. It is the primary neurochemical associated with trust, bonding, safety, and the specific sense of connection that makes a person feel genuinely attached to another. In women, This release is both faster and more pronounced than in men, and its effects are immediate, not as a thought, not as a conscious decision, but as a felt bodily experience that precedes and often overrides rational evaluation. Research published in the Journal of Social and Personal Relationships confirms this mechanism with precision. When a person is touched in a warm, considered, non-threatening way, oxytocin release produces specific changes in emotional state: increased sense of safety, increased openness, increased positive association with the person responsible for the contact. The brain begins to encode that person as safe, as connected, as worth being near. What this means practically is this: a man can say everything right, present himself impeccably, and create zero of the felt chemistry that makes a woman think about him when he is gone. And another man can be unremarkable in his words and create immediate, involuntary, physical attentiveness through a single piece of well-timed, appropriate physical contact: a hand briefly placed on the small of her back, a light touch on the wrist during a moment of genuine laughter, a shoulder that comes slightly closer during a conversation. The contact bypasses the cognitive evaluating brain and speaks directly to the nervous system. The critical distinction here is intention and restraint. Touch that is too frequent or too early reads as desperation or entitlement and produces the opposite effect. The power of physical contact in attraction is specifically in its specificity, that it is meaningful because it is not constant, that it arrives at moments of genuine connection rather than as a strategy, and that it respects the space until the space genuinely invites something closer. The man who understands this does not talk about his qualities. He demonstrates his presence, and she feels the difference before she forms a single conscious opinion about it. Vulnerability number 2. A woman's psychological response to perceived scarcity is one of the most reliable and least flattering mechanisms in human attraction, and understanding it honestly is essential to understanding why effort and availability so often produce the wrong result. Robert Cialdini, whose research on influence and decision-making has defined the field for decades, identified the scarcity principle as one of the most powerful drivers of human valuation. The core insight is simple: we assign higher value to things that are harder to obtain, not because harder to obtain means objectively better, but because the mind uses availability as a proxy for value. What everyone wants is assumed to be worth wanting. What no one wants is assumed to be worth avoiding. In the context of attraction, this principle operates with particular power. A man who is consistently, immediately, unconditionally available communicates something about his value through that availability, specifically that his time and attention are not scarce resources, that they can be obtained at any moment, at any volume, without any particular investment on her part, and what costs nothing tends to be valued accordingly. Contrast this with the man who has genuine direction in his life, his own work, his own interests, his own social world, his own standards for how he spends his time. His availability, when it occurs, carries weight precisely because it is not automatic. His attention feels like something earned rather than something ambient, and the human mind responds to that feeling by assigning significance. This is not about games. It is not about artificial scarcity or withholding warmth as a strategy. It is about the genuine, authentic reality of a man who has a full life that is not organized around any one woman's availability to him. A man who is genuinely busy building something, who has genuine standards about who he gives his time to, who is clearly selective. That man does not need to manufacture scarcity. He has it naturally. and its effect on female psychology is immediate and significant. The man who abandons his plans to be available, who responds instantly to every message, who makes it transparently clear that she is the organizing priority of his entire existence, that man is communicating his value through his behavior, just not in the direction he intends. Vulnerability number 3. A woman's emotional system is specifically responsive to the neurochemical environment produced by uncertainty, surprise, and unresolved tension, and most men eliminate this environment entirely through the very behaviors they believe are making them attractive. Here is the neuroscience. Dopamine, the primary neurotransmitter associated with motivation, pursuit, and reward, is not released most strongly in response to certainty and comfort. It is released most strongly in response to variable reward, to the unpredictable interval between stimulus and outcome, to the tension between desire and resolution. The dopamine system is, at its core, an anticipation system. And anticipation requires something not yet obtained. This is why a woman can feel an extraordinarily powerful pull toward a man who is somewhat difficult to read, not cold, not distant, but genuinely complex, who is warm and fully present when he is there, but clearly has a world that extends beyond this interaction, who surprises her with his humor, with his perspective, with an unexpected decision, who does not map completely onto her prior expectations, who creates in her emotional system the specific feeling of something still being discovered. And this is why a man who makes his entire inner world immediately available, who explains himself fully, who shares every feeling, who eliminates every trace of uncertainty, accidentally eliminates the specific emotional environment in which strong attraction develops. He means to be honest and open. What he actually does is remove the anticipation, and without anticipation, the dopamine cycle does not engage. This does not mean withholding yourself or performing mystery. It means being genuinely, multidimensionally yourself, complex enough, directional enough, interesting enough that she cannot fully predict you, not because you are playing a game, but because you actually have depths that take time to reveal, because you have a life that is genuinely engaging to observe, because the story of who you are is not delivered all at once, but discovered gradually in the way that any story worth reading unfolds. A man who is living a full, purposeful, genuinely interesting life does not have to manufacture emotional tension. He produces it simply by being the full version of himself. Vulnerability number 4. The quality of a man's voice, its depth, its pace, its specific relationship to silence, has a direct and measurable effect on female neurological response that operates entirely beneath conscious evaluation. Research from the University of Aberdeen documented this with specificity. Women consistently rate lower-pitched voices as more attractive, and the association is not arbitrary. At the level of evolutionary biology, a deeper, more resonant voice is a signal of physical and psychological development, of health, of the capacity to handle environmental demands without being overwhelmed by them. Her brain has been processing these signals for millennia. It does not need her to consciously decide to respond. It simply does. But depth of pitch alone is only part of this. The more important variables are pace and relationship to silence. A man who speaks slowly, not because he is uncertain, but because he is composed, communicates through his pacing that he is not anxious about whether you are listening. He is not racing to fill the space before you lose interest. He trusts that what he has to say is worth the time it takes to say it carefully. That trust, transmitted through pacing, produces a specific felt response in the person listening, the sense of being in the presence of someone who is entirely comfortable with himself. The relationship to silence is equally significant. A man who can hold a pause, who can let a moment sit without rushing to fill it, who can ask a question and then actually wait for the answer without jumping into the silence, creates a specific quality of attention that most people never experience from another person. The space he creates around his words makes those words carry more weight. And in that space, something specific happens in her. She leans in, not physically necessarily, but emotionally. She begins to wait for what comes next in a way that is itself a form of genuine engagement. Practice this specifically. Before you speak, breathe. Lower your pace by 30%. Let the silence at the end of a sentence rest for a moment before the next one begins. That quality of presence in your voice will communicate more about your confidence and groundedness than any content your words could carry. 4 vulnerabilities down, 2 to go. These final 2 are the most behaviorally actionable of all 6. And the second to last one is the one that most men in successful long-term relationships have eventually discovered without ever being taught. Subscribe if you haven't, drop a comment on which of the first 4 lands most directly for you, and let's finish. Vulnerability number 5. A woman's attraction is significantly shaped by how other people respond to a man, and by the specific quality of his decision-making and leadership in low-stakes situations. Let me address the social proof dimension first. The human mind, in both men and women, uses the responses of others as a signal of value. We are social animals who evolved in groups, and in groups, the assessment of others provided genuine survival-relevant information about who was worth aligning with. The person others trust, seek out, follow, or admire carries a social signal of value that activates something primal in how we evaluate them. In practice, this means that a man who is visibly enjoyed by the people around him, who has genuine friendships, who creates warmth and energy in a group, who others clearly want to be near, carries an implicit signal of value that no amount of direct self-promotion can replicate. She does not need to decide he is valuable. She sees the evidence of it in how others respond to him, and her system responds accordingly. The leadership dimension is distinct but related. There is a specific psychological response in women to a man who makes decisions with calm, considered certainty, not aggressively, not domineeringly, simply decisively. He has a reservation somewhere interesting. He knows what he wants to order. He makes the plan for the evening without requiring a committee meeting. Small decisions made with quiet confidence transmit something specific to her nervous system. This person is not afraid of being wrong, is not paralyzed by the possibility of disapproval, and does not require constant external validation to move forward. The opposite of this, the man who defers every decision, who asks what she wants at every junction, who refuses to commit to a direction for fear of getting it wrong, intends to be respectful, but the behavioral signal it produces is the signal of someone who lacks confidence in his own judgment, and that signal, however unfair it may seem, activates withdrawal rather than closeness. Lead with lightness, make decisions, offer a direction, trust your own judgment enough to act on it. She does not need you to be right every time. She needs to see that you are capable of choosing. Vulnerability number 6, the final one, and the one that, when you fully understand it, reframes everything else in this video. All 5 of the previous vulnerabilities, the oxytocin response to touch, the value response to scarcity, the dopamine engagement with uncertainty, the nervous system response to vocal authority, the attraction to social proof, and decisive leadership, all of them ultimately serve a single deeper purpose. They are all signals, and what they are all signaling at the most fundamental level is safety, not physical safety only, though that matters, emotional safety, psychological safety, the specific, deeply felt sense that this man is stable enough, grounded enough, self-possessed enough that she does not have to protect herself in his presence, that she can release the armor she carries through the world, the independence, the control, the guardedness, and be simply and fully herself. Here is the precise psychological reality. Women spend an enormous amount of energy managing their external presentation, being competent, being composed, being capable. That management is real effort. It requires a continuous expenditure of psychological resources. And in the presence of a man who activates genuine safety, who is calm without being passive, strong without being threatening, present without being consuming, the need for that management disappears. She can put the armor down. And in that specific experience, the experience of being able to put the armor down, is where genuine, lasting, deep attraction lives, not the surface level engagement produced by novelty or charm. The specific, embodied, involuntary sense of this is the person I want to be near. The man who produces this is not the loudest in the room. He is not the most aggressively confident or the most visibly successful. He is the most settled, the most genuinely comfortable in his own skin, the most clearly not requiring anything from her to feel okay about himself. His presence is an invitation, not a demand, and she feels that difference in her body before she forms a single conscious opinion about it. Everything else in this video, the touch, the scarcity, the tension, the voice, the leadership, these are the signals that tell her he might be that man. But it is this sixth thing, the actual, genuine, inhabited quality of settled self-possession, that either confirms or denies what the signal suggested. Build this, not as a performance, as an actual daily practice of becoming the most grounded version of yourself available. That is the work, and it is the work that produces everything else as a natural consequence. Let me bring these six together into a single picture, because they are not six separate things to perform. They are six dimensions of a single underlying quality. The common thread through all six vulnerabilities is this: they all respond to a man who is genuinely, inhabitably himself, who is not performing his value, not managing her perception, not organizing his behavior around what she might think of it, who is present without anxiety, who is grounded without rigidity, who leads without requiring followers. The touch works because it comes from a man who is comfortable with genuine connection rather than afraid of it. The scarcity works because he has a life that is genuinely full rather than artificially withheld. The emotional tension works because he is actually complex and interesting rather than performing mystery. The voice works because the pace comes from genuine composure rather than affect. The leadership works because the decisions come from actual confidence rather than performed certainty. And the safety works because everything else is real, and she can feel that it is real. You cannot manufacture any of these six things consistently. You can temporarily perform them, but the performance is detectable. And detected performance produces withdrawal rather than attraction. What you can do is build the underlying reality, develop genuine self-knowledge, pursue genuine direction, cultivate genuine emotional regulation, become actually the man whose presence produces these responses because it cannot help but do so. That is the work. It is not quick, but it is the only work that produces lasting results, because lasting results require a real foundation, and no amount of technique substitutes for the genuine article. 6 vulnerabilities. Her nervous system responds to intentional, respectful touch through an immediate, involuntary neurochemical cascade that builds trust and connection faster than any words can. Her valuation system assigns significance to what costs something to obtain, and the man with genuine direction and genuine standards produces that response naturally. Her dopamine system is specifically activated by complexity, uncertainty, and unresolved tension, and the man who is genuinely multidimensionally alive creates that environment without manufacturing it. Her vocal processing system responds to depth, pace, and comfortable silence as signals of composed self-possession, and that response is neurological, not chosen. Her social perception is shaped by how others respond to a man and by his capacity to make decisions with quiet certainty. And beneath all five of those, the deepest vulnerability of all is the hunger for genuine safety. The specific, embodied sense that in this man's presence the armor can come down. None of these vulnerabilities are flaws. They are the precise architecture of female psychological response, built over millions of years of human development for reasons that were genuinely important. Understanding them is not a license to manipulate. It is an invitation to develop, to become the kind of man who produces these responses naturally as a consequence of who he actually is. That is the only version of this that works long term, and it is the only version worth building. Now I want to hear from you. Which of these six landed most directly for you? Which one named something you had been experiencing without the language to describe it? And which one represents the clearest area of development for where you are right now? Drop it honestly in the comments. I read every one, and the most specific answers are always the most useful. If this gave you something today, share it with someone who needs to hear it. That is how this channel reaches the men it is built for. Subscribe if you haven't. New content every week. I'll see you in the next one. I'm Liza. This is Secrets Inside the Mind. Take care of yourselves.